podcast in an hour with the Chief Growth Officer of Aikido, Aikido.dev. I see Frank. Yeah, I got it. Yeah. The fifth Belgian unicorn represent
Nice.
after Odoo just got valuated now at I think 7 billion USD. We have another one with Aikido, 0 to 1 billion in valuation in under 24 months, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, now you got to stop bragging, Olivier. You just got to share some value. Like,
Yeah.
only kidding. Um,
I mean, I have nothing to do with that, unfortunately. So I'm just representing Belgium's success and also the European ecosystem to Frank's post earlier today, where it all depends on how you look at it, right?
exactly. Yeah, and actually, I found out from that post. Did you guys know Frank's birthday is on St. Paddy's Day? What a coincidence.
On what day? Sorry.
St. Patrick's Day, the big
Ah,
holiday where everyone's just drinking.
well, isn't that just any day in Ireland then?
Ah, you're very funny. Yeah, kind of, but no.
Yeah. Well, I would say yeah. That's
Okay,
that's
cool. I
that's
think
the
this.
reputation you have, man. That's
Yeah, exactly. It actually is the reputation I have as well.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, if it's Friday, you're there with the Guinness in the Clay Club community.
exactly.
So
You only live once. Okay, so there's enough people here now to get started, I think, and people can join in, they can just jump in. Today's guest room is mainly about when you get a campaign working, what can you do to keep it working, or when it stops working again to actually get it working again? Because normally what happens is people just try a bunch of random things, they have no visibility into what's working or why. And when it stops, which is inevitably going to happen because nothing keeps working forever, you need to figure out why, or you need to figure out what to do to kind of get that bacon again, as Frank was saying. Um, so Olivia, I'm going to hand it over to you, and you're going to share all the sauce.
oh shit! I thought this was gonna be a conversation, not like a
It is a
keynote.
conversation. It is a conversation. Uh,
Um, yeah, no, like the reason why I feel that's an important topic is because we have some customers where we're doing outbound to the same lists essentially um, for like 24 plus months. And yeah, I mean, there aren't many things changing. There aren't that many updates to the product either. The market is the same. The pain points are the same. It's like, especially I feel this when you sell into traditional industries that generally move slow, right? And then you gotta kind of figure out how to tweak your messaging because at that point it's really about the messaging aspect of it because you have a lot of um, it's really on the technical aspect, in my opinion, right? It's deliverability and it's spin tags and making sure because you're hitting those people over and over again, right? And to this specific group, we have a lot of personal emails also. You got to make sure that you like kind of tweak your copy every 6 to 8 weeks, nonetheless, right? And so then also having some rotation between inboxes, making sure you're not hitting the same people from the same inbox, things like that are a little bit more challenging to do. Um, but also, like, if your campaign stops working, how do you then kind of diagnose what's not working, right? And so
yeah,
for that, I generally tend to look at okay, my reply rates have gone down. Did something change on the data, right? So we'll verify emails again, see if there's, in this case specifically, there could be companies that have gone out of business, right? Companies that have been taken over. Maybe people who unsubscribed but are still being contacted, right? So you want to have like kind of those mechanisms in place who check for those things automatically as much as possible. But also, what is it that you said that might not be resonating anymore, right? So th for that, you want to have like feedback groups from the salespeople, essentially. Um, so yeah, not sure if there's any
So
specific questions from the audience.
when when a campaign is working, let's assume there wasn't a drop off. At what
Okay.
point do you decide it's time to retire or adjust that copy? Or do you ever see that happening? In my case, I don't see that happening that regularly. Normally, there's a drop off, and that's kind of when I decide to change the copy a little bit.
Hmm.
But have you seen it where the copy genuinely is just producing, producing, producing? Do you let it keep running even if it surpasses that 6 to 8 week mark, like you said, or do you force it to change? Do you change it a little bit
Yeah, that's a good question. It's
for the
more
sake of
of a
deliverability?
Yeah, it's more of not contacting the same lead twice with the same messaging kind of thing,
Hmm.
right? So imagine that we have set up campaigns for a specific group of the list, right? And so if that has 5,000 people and we have X amount of inboxes and the campaigns runs over X amount of time, then we can kind of foresee that this is over this amount of time is when the campaign is going to stop and we either need to
Okay.
push more leads or spin up a different campaign, right? But in this particular case and where this kind of comes from is we just see like a decrease in reply rates across the board, right? So when we start with this client, for example, we had reply rates between sometimes as high as 25, 30%. Yeah. Now we're like at between 2 and 7, right?
Yeah.
And we're like trying to figure out what is up here, what's wrong, right? Because you can only change the messaging that much. Um, right? You can't invent words. There's only so many words in a dictionary, right? So how do you tweak? What do you say? How do you approach it? And so for that, we just like to try new things to the same group of people,
Okay.
basically.
So ultimately, it's just whenever there's a drop off, or once you then need to reuse the same leads because there are only so many leads in the market.
Yeah. And you kind of want to have your overall benchmarks as well, right? So positive replies or leads contacted before a meeting booked, for example, right? And like with this specific customer, we kind of have to have like 10 meetings a month, more or less, um, outbound meetings booked to be
Hmm.
hitting the target, right?
Actually,
So
that's an interesting topic here. Is for those benchmarks, do you look at industry averages? Do you look at averages across your clients? Is it based on the first campaign? Do you work it back off of the amount of meetings? Where is that baseline if it's your first time working with this client? Where do you
yeah, it's
get that?
always based on the client specifically. Obviously, we do have some kind of like standards and things like that, but I feel that the kind of responses highly depend on are they targeting SMEs, mid-market, enterprise, and then based off of that, because if it's SME, we are like by standard aiming to be between 5 and 20% normal reply rate, right? Preferably above 10%. That would be like very good standard
Mhm.
SME wise, especially targeting like in the more traditional industries, right? But then what I think is most important here is what influences the kind of how how bad do we allow it to be, so to say, right? Um, is average contract value and close rates, right? So imagine that you are selling complex fintech solution and you have like deal sizes starting from 500K ARR and up.
Mhm.
If I get you 4 deals and you close two of them, I've brought you 1 million in ARR. And if we got you 10 meetings or 2 meetings to get that, it doesn't really matter, right? If you know what I mean. So it really depends on what the overall goal is. So I like to start always from the client's perspective of it's either mouths to feed, being like how many salespeople do they have to foresee from leads, right? Or
Hmm.
what's their overall net new ARR target that they want to add? And then start from there, right? Because then you need to have your markets mapped, as in like amount of companies, leads that we can sell into. And then if you see like huge discrepancies in between that, we're gonna have to add channels. We're gonna have to be super creative. We would rather like maybe take a couple of months to present something substantially instead of like, spray and praying kind of stuff. So yeah.
Okay. So for you, it normally comes from the sales side, is you either determine how many deals they want to close um, for a certain amount of time or however many calls they want to book. And normally that data is quite comprehensive. You have like a close rate and you can kind of work back from there. But with regards to benchmarks on reply rate and positive reply rate, even if they were already running campaigns, the way they were running it, generally speaking, at least from what I've seen, is very different to what you'll be doing as an agency. So how do you come up with the benchmarks for those metrics that aren't really a relation to the sales metrics? Because they're very like your reply rate and your positive reply rate, although they play into that booking rate and this close rate, they're not the same. And you can have a very high positive reply rate and a very low reply rate, or vice versa. I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So it again, it kind of depends on what you're trying to solve. So we like to work like how I prefer to go off of like qualified meetings booked as like the number
Okay.
one metric that we look at based off the amount of leads, right? That we have. Because for example, like let's say we had a client being in HR tech, and we had like no matter what we said to the same list, like 7 to 15% reply rates, from which 30 to 50 were positive, right? So I knew
Yeah,
by
well,
heart like one for every 80 to 120 leads contacted would turn out into like there can be some action taken there, right? So we would convert them to a meeting or they would be interested to talk in a couple of months, something like that, right? Um, but again, like, none of that really matters if you're not gonna like close them, right? So
yeah.
we're typically not so interested in looking at the metrics of, yes, but we got you 50 replies, and with those 50 replies, you can, like, obviously, yes, there's market feedback, and that's super important, right? Especially for this client, that was also like super important. So they sometimes they just want to see traction, right? But yeah, I mean, like as I said, for example, if we're targeting salespeople for as we did for demo desk, we had a benchmark of 1 to 350. Then it kind of got worse, and we were like at 1 to every 500, more or less, right? And that's also okay then for what they were like selling, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, that
Okay.
not sure
No,
if
I
that
get you.
was specific enough as an answer, but um, yeah, most of our customers haven't done much outbound themselves yet
Okay.
before coming to us. So we are not really having to compare to what they have. And if so, then it's just super easy. Like, okay, cool. We will literally run the same campaign as you did, but we will do it applied with our standards, and we'll show you it will be better.
Yeah. No, I think we're on the same page there actually, because normally what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is that you start with like the end goal is always the amount of meetings that you can book. And when you run a campaign, if you're booking the amount of meetings you want, or you're closing the amount of deals that you want, fantastic. You keep doing it, or you try and optimize it in whatever with whatever feedback you're getting from the sales calls. But really, the reply rate on those other metrics beforehand only come into play if things aren't working, and you can try and use them to diagnose what's going wrong. So if you're
Yeah.
not getting the amount of meetings you're hoping to get, well, then you can look at your positive reply rate or your positive reply rate to book rate or your reply rate or whatever else as kind of metrics to analyze what could be possibly going wrong here in this funnel. Um, is that what you
Yeah,
were saying,
because
kind of?
yes, yes, because like if you have a horizontal solution like Frank that any salesperson with a pulse can use, then you can like optimize for volume, deliverability, and just like more volume is usually the answer, right? More and more better is also a good thing, right? Because Frank obviously
Mhm.
has good metrics, right? So it really matters what you say, but eventually there you want to have an offer so good that converts to the person no matter what, right? Um, right? So you don't want to like over complicate your campaigns there because it's just CAC wise not so optimal to have high complexity versus outputs, right? So you want to go for volume there and have like great conversion there. But if we're selling again like this complex fintech solution and your market is literally like 8,000 people over like 2,000 companies in the world, then you know that's your market. Like you know, that's it. And so it's
Yeah.
like cool. We have 2 years to convert 25% or whatever they sold to investors, right? But that's what they're going to be selling into these investors. Like we will take 25% of this market, which will give us this valuation, which will give us this ARR, which will give us this NRR or whatever, right? And we'll try these channels. Like we'll invest on partnership, we'll invest on outbound, we'll invest on inbound. We need this amount of cash, blah blah, right? And so then it doesn't really like what's most important is how you're not gonna piss off those people so that yeah, you do get some traction. Because on the especially on the enterprise side also, it's like it's a demand gen play more than it is a demand capture play because there aren't that many signals and things like that that you can optimize for. So it's
Yeah.
really a demand gen play. So it's more like how can I say something useful and valuable to these people? And those people might come inbound 3 months later. They might have never replied to your fucking email, but they'll say on the inbound form, yeah, our CEO or whatever, my manager told me to get in touch with you because they found what you do interesting. And then we'll look back in HubSpot and we'll see that we actually send them an email or multiple messages, which seem to have resonated. We just didn't get a response because they weren't in market, wasn't timely, wasn't whatever. But if we would have never sent that message, they never would have come inbound either. Um,
Yeah.
and so there's these elements to it that should be taken into account when looking at the overall go-to-market motion, right? And so that's one thing that I see a lot of GTM engineers or a lot of agencies not having the ability to do in the market because they're not aware of, like they're essentially selling replies to emails, if you know what I mean. And we're just not like, I don't give a shit about that, honestly.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I agree, and I'm the same. Although I think it's interesting for smaller markets, there are a lot of agencies. Like we had Enzo on last week, and he normally just turns down any company that doesn't have a particular market size, because it doesn't make sense for him to take them on as a client. And a lot of other outbound agencies are like that. And I think it'd just be
yeah.
interesting to hear at what stage do you consider a company or when do you consider outbound not to make sense for a company? Is it when they can't afford it? Is it when the market is a certain size? Is it more nuanced than that? Is it a mix of different things? Um, when do you say no to people when it comes to outbound? So everyone seems to have a different answer here. It ultimately depends on what you deliver.
Well, okay, so the question is when I like which type of offers I think outbound isn't a good motion for, or when do we
Offers,
decline to work with customers? Because those are two different
yeah,
questions, right?
yeah, it would be more so when you decline. But I was kind of pulling off of your point about the size of the market. But
Yeah,
ultimately, it's yeah, when you decline, it's not really a specific constraint or a
right.
metric.
So it's kind of interesting because I have this post ready for tomorrow, so I'll soft launch it here, kind of. So if we look at outbound, outbound is just like proactively going to get your ideal customers, right? Instead of waiting for them to come to you, correct? Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, cool. So it can work for anyone, right? Because if I sell fish, I also go stand on the market where potential buyers might walk around and I'll shout that my fish is the freshest, right? Instead of just putting up a sign at my house and hoping for people to ring my bell, right? And so Whether they can afford to work with high quality or premium providers, that's another story, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I do think that it can work for anyone. It obviously doesn't make a lot of sense if you, first of all, don't know what you're doing. Secondly, don't have time or a willingness to invest in understanding that channel, right? It would be like me working with a YouTube agency, but I have no interest to be on YouTube. That,
Yeah.
yeah, that just doesn't make any sense, right? So I think that any company can literally leverage outbound because it's just like, okay, instead of like if you know who you're for, if you don't know who you're for, then it's much harder. You can still do outbound, but it's just harder, right? So I think that's one thing in the market that I kind of don't agree with, where why do people like Enzo and agency operators like that decline small TAMs? Because essentially they understand that most companies don't know who they are for. And so they are really, their operations and way of working are really optimized for volume. So in that sense, you could kind of say it's kind of good that they don't know who they are for, because those companies will talk to anyone with a pulse, and they're just happy to have motion, right? So
Yeah.
to say, whether that converts in revenue, okay, that's another story. But so we love to partner with companies who understand exactly who they are for, or at least are willing to invest time, effort, and resources into figuring out who they are for, through the use of outbound as a way of directly marketing to individuals rather than broadcasting a message. Because if you want to do ads and all that, you need to be very, like, you need to have a compelling story and ideally a unique point of view. And so I would say if you don't have that, you're already ruled out for ads. If you don't have any creativity, you're also ruled out for ads. Because, you know, that all starts from the notion of content, right? And if you don't have content or any good narrative to sell, outbound is a better motion to get away with trying a lot of things faster.
Okay, cool. So you would say it would work for anyone who can afford to play around with it for a while and understand who it is they need to be selling to, both from their own perspective, but also from the customer's perspective. And what do they need to be saying to them for them to actually listen?
It works for anyone who has a proactive mindset and willingness to understand buyers in the market that they're active in.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Um, so back to the main question, which is if a campaign is working. You've done all this, you've got a campaign working now. It's been working for let's say a month, 2 months, or less, probably about a month. And there's just a dip. And what do you normally do to try and diagnose why there was that dip, and how do you go about fixing it? And I know there's a gazillion different things that could happen here, but just generally speaking, are there any patterns, or what are your first kind of steps in the right direction?
Yeah, great question. Um, so generally, I would say, is the list like, are we targeting the right people, right? Like, you know,
Mhm.
is the quality good of the list, which should have been checked before, but you never know, right? There can be like, you know, wait, let me go back because there's a dip. I would analyze the amount of replies we got and then look at like which kind of replies, like what are those replies saying, right? And if there's a lot of people who are saying no thanks, not interested, I would look into the specifics of those people and like try to understand why would they not be interested, right? And I kind of go down the rabbit hole, but also check deliverability. But deliverability usually isn't the problem for us because we don't do a lot of volume, so we're really not really struggling with any of that, honestly.
Mhm.
Um, as far as I know. So yeah, I would go into the replies and try to understand what are the patterns there, and then from there optimize. But it can also be like something random, right? Are the settings good? Did something change? Do we have disconnected inboxes? Do we are we targeting people who have local holidays? Do we get a lot of out of offices? Those things.
Okay, so the first step is checking out the obvious things. Then it would be looking at the actual feedback that we got from people, which is the replies, or the out of offices, which are still replies. And then from there, let's say all of them are good. What's the kind of more, what do you do in the more abstract scenarios where it's not as kind of clear cut, where replies seem good, everything seems fine, but you're just getting fewer of them. Targeting is fine. Do you normally just try something completely new? Do you try and figure out what was going wrong? What do you do?
To be very honest, I don't have like a straightforward answer to that because this has happened where we just see a decline and it's just
Hmm.
like seasonal. Like it just picks back up the next
Yeah.
month, nothing changed, and it's just weird. So yeah, in those cases, most of the time, not we're not so capable of spinning up an answer, or we don't have like a methodology of spinning up an answer, I would say. There's no like, we don't have a framework for that specifically, I would say.
Well, that in itself is an appropriate answer. I mean, it's just to kind of leave it, and ultimately, if it's a good campaign, it'll start working again. Um,
I mean,
or
yeah, there's
yeah,
only so much that we can control. There's always all these other dynamics. I would be very curious to hear if Frank has any answer to that same question, for example, but or even
yeah,
Alejandra,
I
if
think
she
that'd be
has any
interesting.
experience doing that. Um,
Yeah, what do you guys think? We might start with Frank. Frank, what do you think? How do you approach this? I know you're not an outbound agency, but
Sorry,
I
can
think it would
you
be interesting.
can you repeat the question? I'm just
So
multitasking.
let's say your campaigns for Salesforce or any of the companies of
Yeah,
the Forge infrastructure are working well 1 month, and then there's just a big dip.
yeah,
Everything looks fine. All the obvious kind of lazy answers are taken. Or
yeah,
not lazy answers, but the obvious things are
yeah.
done. You've got the deliverability is fine, the list is fine.
Hmm.
Um, the replies are the same. It's just you're getting fewer of them, or you're getting more the same
Yeah.
quantity of out of office. What do you do to then diagnose what the issue is? Or do you treat it as an issue, or do you just kind of leave it? Do you
So
just
there
kind
are
of wait for it to
some
pick up again?
sometimes peculiar kind of weeks where things dip, and unless unless it lasts longer, like if it lasts for a week, then you don't do anything. Kind of you think just next week is things gonna go back up. Kind of there are these sort of weird dips, and you have no explanation essentially sometimes, and just
Yeah.
things just dip and then they come back up. But typically when things dip and you just get no responses whatsoever, like it happened to me, I believe a couple of days ago, I just go and do placement tests. So do a placement test on all infrastructure and just see if something lands in spam. If something's like really bad, I just cut it off. I just
Mhm.
keep the good infrastructure running. So that's on the email front. Um, on the LinkedIn front, I mean, there's no typical dips there really, but like also replies can massively drop suddenly. And it's just, sometimes it's how the machine runs and sometimes, it just dip for a bit and whatever. Like, so I never worry if it's like a few days up to a week, but I will start worrying if the next week come Monday, Tuesday, and I'm not getting like, hundreds of replies again, then I'll
Yeah.
start worrying. Yes, that something is worrying. So that's why, I monitor things quite, I mean, every agency, I think, monitors things, on a daily basis. Um, you can actually set up various alerts as well to proactively tell you that something's broken. You can set up, I think, a bunch of things in like, if you're savvy enough, like a bunch of things in NA10 to inform you when something doesn't work, or if something's just unusual. I know a lot of agencies do that. It just kind of alerts them sort of proactively. If it's sort of below a baseline, the baseline could be X, right? And it just massively drops below the baseline and it doesn't recover for a few days, it will alert different people in agencies. So I know people do that. Same with scores on mailbox, like deliverability scores, what we call warm scores. So you can alert stuff. And what else? Uh, yeah, and yeah. I mean, the other thing I want to say, I didn't say that because I was just being quiet, but what the other kind of way to look at outbound is essentially, sort of a form of advertising as well. It's something I stipulate with a lot of people when I talk to them. Doesn't matter agencies or not agencies, but like, so yeah, scale also matters, which is why Enzo, needs scale. And because there'll be other sort of impact. So I think there's another agency I know that talked about this on LinkedIn a fair bit, which is that when they keep on running cold emails consistently and at scale, and even though they don't have that many replies, they see huge volumes in traffic on the website, which comes from cold emails.
Yeah.
And they can track that really well. So we have a kind of similar thing where we track, people that are signing up on essentially inbound, but that's outbound related activity, right?
Yeah.
So, but they do go to the website, and when they sign up, it says, "Where do you hear about us?" Well, I got a cold email from Frank, let's say, So that's all the outbound activity. So, I think when I talk to a lot of agencies and customers, we're trying to figure out all the benefits that just let's say, cold email gives you. So naturally, meetings is one. The other things that I typically, keep telling people is test other things like conversion actions, like, try and so I have a task right now with another company where we're going to send a few thousand emails to get people to sign up to a webinar, for example. That's not a conversion action. It'll drive a ton of leads once people are going to sign up to the webinar, as an example. The other one is like check out some things on the website. So you assume the conversion path continues on the site. And you need to be smart about these what I call purchase journeys or conversion journeys. So don't always expect a direct response, people wanting to book a demo. And then the other one, which I like, I think in the space where, particularly where Olivier is, like, you have a smaller TAM, sometimes you don't really know who's the right person to talk about the problem that the company is solving. And so the cold email campaigns have actually are simply asking, hey, who's responsible for this thing on your site?
Right, exactly.
And that's a whole campaign. It's like you're selling nothing. You're just asking, hey, I believe I saw a problem, or you're like, I just wondering who's the right person. And then the one of the things that may happen is then that recipient just sees the right person, and because of this, typical behavior that you have, if you don't automate stuff, then the response is quite high from the company.
And it works particularly well for mid-market. I used to run this play a lot. Actually, that was like probably for a year the only outbound the only type of prospecting I used to do would always be targeting C-level, actually most of the time CEO or COO, and do the company research, because you don't have to add any like personalization regarding the person itself or whatever. Like, okay, I can add some fluff, but
there is one kind of playbook on this. You could, in Clay and other softwares, build a sequence out where you're sending an email, and then you're taking a secondary contact into the copy as well.
PS is better person, yeah.
Yeah, you're like in the PS, or should I talk to,
Yeah.
or should I talk to Mike, or should I talk to your CEO about this? So you can psychologically trigger people to respond back when you're saying, oh, should I talk to this secondary contact, or should I talk to your CEO about this? And then people are like, no, I don't want you to talk to my CEO about this, So it can definitely work. And the smaller the time, the more kind of, creative you need to be around these sort of things. But yeah, you have to think about, the reasons why people respond back to you, So there's also a lot of just purely psychological reasons. People want to be promoted. People don't want to look bad in front of their CEO, etc. And like I always test these sort of copies, or tell to agencies and customers that we work with, is just test different sort of strategy once a quarter with every ICP in your market. So copy changes, but then the whole, what are we telling to the person the next time around, once a quarter, massively changes theirs.
I think it can be helpful sometimes to not necessarily treat outbound like this, but to look at other marketing channels and kind of look at the parallels. So for example, with influencer marketing, a common thread there is that generally the relationship between your spend on influencer marketing and the ROI you get on it isn't as direct as other channels. And sometimes at smaller markets, it can be the same with outbound, where, like you were saying, and like Olivier was saying, you can send a bunch of emails, and even though you might not necessarily get a reply, it can still sometimes be valuable, provided they don't mark the email as spam, or provided you still seeded something in their head, or they moved it horizontally to somebody else in the organization, or they visited your website, or you got them into your ecosystem online somewhere else. It's still valuable. It's just that the problem is that us as agencies, or anybody here who needs to track this stuff, we need to be able to actually associate our work with that outcome that ultimately happens at some stage. So really what you need to do is just as much as you can try and track each of those steps and then try and tie outbound back to the end outcome. Which is why tracking is so valuable in any marketing channel. But yeah, I think you're right here, both of you, that it can be helpful to look at what else it can do aside from just replies. Even if a reply rate is low, it can still be driving a lot of revenue. But
I'll give you an example
Alejandro,
of what I'm doing right now, just in a PS section, which is I'm just proactively writing, hey, if this is not a value, here's a good session on how to write really kick-ass cold emails, and I'm sending that to let's say to SDR managers, and then the person simply responds back, thank you so much for this video, it's really cool. So like they don't need my service, which is great, but like what you're trying to do is you're just trying to increase the reply rates, because having any replies coming back to your infrastructure is good for your deliverability. So how do you get replies back? Either provide some, I don't know, nice video, a session on here's some value, whatever, or make them respond fuck you in the email as well. That also works because that's good for deliverability. Yeah, learning how to drive response from the audience, good and bad or neutral, is just a craft you need to learn, I would say.
Yeah, that's cool. Alejandra, how would you have anything to add on this? Just with regards to
Yeah,
kind of, yeah.
a few things actually that I do agree on, like the replies, meaning like what exactly are they saying? But I would add a deeper layer into, let's say, positive replies. But what type of positive replies is it? Like, do they want to book now? Are they just interested? Should I just send an info? Or is it postponed? Like, try to classify those, I think, in a deeper level can also help us understand like what's going on. Just on that last part from Frank. But also on the right person, I'm trying to tackle everything we just talked about in the last minute, so let me know if it still makes
No
sense. So
worries.
in the right person email part where Frank mentioned of name dropping, I actually saw it working very well because of course we don't want to be like pointed at like you're not doing your job, so who should I be doing? And at the end of the day, we are reaching out to people, so we have to connect in that level. So in my experience, it has worked and I would apply it, but I wouldn't do, and I hadn't done it, it might test it, but different campaign just for that. I had it more of a follow-up email, let's say on the third level, third email I've sent, then I would ask, am I not reaching out to the right person or should I reach out to this instead? And that tend to work well, but I mean, it might be worth to just do a different campaign specifically for that approach. Now, on the initial question on how would I know if a campaign hasn't, it's just a seasonality thing or not. Honestly, I would personalize, like separate between two types of clients. If it's an older client, we have data on that, and I would always go first to data, meaning if it's been a year with us, if it's been a month with us, is it actually how is it became like, I would say more of a year because month to month it changes, but how is it behaving last year versus this year? Is it really because of summer? Is it really because of X or Y? Or if not, then probably it's something that this changed the pitch or the list, whatever. But then the second segment I want to talk about is like if it's a new client and then we don't have any data on them, then I would again go back into what other value am I adding to them? If it's not with the calls being booked, but rather is it with now leading them to their website? Are we tracking that actually? Are we cross-checking that it makes sense that we are still like making sense for them, I mean. And I also always try to keep like a cost per lead for them, like they have it in mind. If it's like, well, how much is it costing you to do this with like inbound Google Ads, let's say, how much is it costing you versus outbound, and then compare if it's still worth for you in that sense. That's, that would make sense. Yeah.
No, that it made perfect sense for me anyway. Um, yeah, I would agree. I guess I wonder, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well, Olivia, because you're quite good at kind of breaking these things down and simplifying
Yeah.
them. But like, I wonder what all this comes down to, because we've kind of gone over a load of different playbooks and stuff that kind of work well. But I think it would be helpful if we tried to figure out why they worked well. Because then we can use it to come up with other strategies that have a similar outcome, as opposed to just repeating the same things that have worked in the past. So like I wonder, Olivier, what do you think is causing the asking if this would be better for somebody else in the organization? Why do you think that one works? And why do you think I guess this is a very difficult question to answer, but I just think even just thinking about it is helpful. Um,
Yeah, so great question, and it's very much has to do with psychology. And I learned this lesson actually not from cold email, but from cold calling, right? And so there's a couple of layers here, but I would definitely say the first layer is just when people are being asked to help instead of feeling like you're asking something of them, right? Or expecting something from them, um, it tends to work better, right? So uh, it will kind of just tune into what kind of personality is the recipient, right? Are they, for example, proactive, where you can get away with like, okay, maybe we'll take an example, right? So you, whatever situation you're in, you can raise a certain concern, right? Let's say, oh, I'm so tired, or oh, I'm so thirsty, right? You will have two different kinds of people around you. The ones who will offer you a drink, right? Without like kind of asking you, they'll just give you something to drink, right? And then you have the person who will like either not or just ask you, right? But still kind of wait for that um, kind of confirmation, right? And I feel it's kind of the same when you're reaching out to people. So I feel that giving them the option to choose who they want to be, like do they want to be helpful or not, is definitely like a mechanism that triggers people, right? So it's like that's what I feel works with the who in your organization should I talk to about this, right? Because they're
Yeah.
either gonna know or not know, right? And a lot of it depends on how well your research was done. Um, but yeah, in general, when it comes to like reaching out cold to people, it's kind of yeah, it's super hard. But generally, like humor works a lot also. Like depending again on the kind of persona you're reaching out to, like you don't. But everyone likes humor. I don't think that there's any type of job title that doesn't like humor, right? So adding that into the mix,
we're all human.
definitely. Yeah, exactly. So that's also an aspect on its own, right? Looking at it from that sense. Like I used to write and I still love that. I don't write a lot anymore, but when I was doing outbound for companies back in the day, I would always write as if I would know that person, right? Like using all the research we had done and like
Yeah.
being very informal. And it would sometimes like very on a blue moon piss off some directors who were like, how dare you address me by my first name? Do you know me? I don't know you, blah blah. But so that's kind of interesting because they still took the time to respond, right? So I would always call them and try to have like human conversation with them, kind of disarm and dismantle. And so
Mm.
all those mechanisms should be incorporated in your play. It's literally just like observation or assumption based on research. What do you think about it? I'm either here to help or I think I could help, or who do you think could help me figure out, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of those things also when cold calling, I would really do that. Like for example, in the Netherlands, right? That works really well. Like calling them and asking, um, "Hey, can I ask you for a favor?" Because they are like friendly people and they're pretty straightforward as well. So the moment you don't ask that, we have Hidachi here, eh? So he'll be able to either confirm or completely call BS on what I'm about to say next. But basically, I feel that when I was calling into the Netherlands, they didn't like at the moment that I would start like kind of opening more in a salesy way, they would immediately say, Is this called acquisition? Is this a sales call? I'm not interested." So I was like, fuck this shit. So I would flip the script and I would be like, Hey, Wesley, it's Olivier here. Can I ask you for a favor? Can I ask you a quick question? Or this person told me you might be able to help me, right? Or if it was the receptionist, um, I would ask, "Hey, is Wesley in?" And they would be like, "What is this about?" And I would say, "Oh, never mind. Maybe you can help me. I was actually curious about blah blah blah." And thought that it might be super relevant for Wesley, and they would immediately say, "Oh, I don't know anything about that. Let me get Wesley." Right?
Hmm.
Because you just kind of go into straight into the, like, what's the reason why you're calling, basically, um, and not coming across as if you're trying to sell something, but really like, hey, I'm just like genuinely interested. Are you struggling with this? Are you not struggling with this? And if you're able to articulate that very well in a written format, I think you have a very powerful mechanism to scale your business, because that's driving home the point that Frank said as well, like learning how to, yeah, write a compelling narrative and have a good story that you can articulate in a few sentences, is ultimately what's going to give you the power to scale anything, really.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. Another kind of point on this would be that the reason I've seen those question campaigns, I think anyway, work so well for me, um, is that there's always a certain level of uncertainty in a campaign. We kind of have to assume a lot when we're writing copy about why something might resonate with the audience. And
Yeah.
when you just admit all of that uncertainty, it reads an awful lot more honest and transparent. So generally it's received a lot better, and it also leads to the prospect receiving it in a way where they feel like they're making the decision to move it forward or to move it in any direction. And it gives them all of the power, but generally if you write it well, you actually are influencing their decision because it would make more sense for them to then move it to somebody else. But you're
Yeah.
absorbing all of that uncertainty, so you can be a little bit lazier with your personalization, and it comes off as more authentic as opposed to less.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
also, there's so many things we can't control, right? Like, is that person having a bad day while he's reading his emails? Like, he might send a fuck off, piss off email because of that, right? And like, again, like, I really look at that really based off of my cold calling experience, because that was really the case. Like, you would get people who were shouting at you on the phone, and it had nothing to do with what you said. You're just calling them at a bad time. And then I would just disarm it. Like, I would address the fact that they're pissed off. Hey, sounds like you're having a bad day. Is there anything I can do to make it better? And
yeah,
if they would say, yeah, just hang up the phone and shut up, cool, I'll do that. Right? So it's like, you can't drive, or you can't, oh yeah, what's the best English expression here? It's a good question, but um, we're not trying to sell, we're not trying to convince people, we're not trying to sell, right? We're just trying to make them aware of either
we're trying
potential
to
problem.
persuade through reasoning, I guess.
I mean, it's not persuasion. I don't like it
Don't
at
think
all.
so.
No, not at all. I mean, I know there's like Cialdini and persuasion and all that stuff. I do
Mhm.
think that comes into play when you're doing demand generation at scale. But at the end of the day, it's just like, I feel it's more effective when you look at it through the lens of, um, you're giving them a alternative um, idea, right? And that alternative idea is either built around like a potential problem they are unaware of, or a potential solution they are unaware of, right? Because there's like so many things out there, and it's super hard to know what could be good for them, right? So how can you
Yeah,
kind of be pissed at someone who shows that they try to understand you, try to reach you in the best possible way, and
yeah,
are essentially offering you something that they think could be valuable to you, right? It's like getting freebies in the supermarket. You can
yeah.
take the chips or not take the chips, but it's your decision, right? They are there, they're being offered, right? Um,
I think this is interesting though, because I think this is where we might disagree. When I think of persuasion, um, like you were listing out the things that we want to invoke in the reader or in the recipient, but is that in itself not an act of persuasion where we're purposely trying to manufacture their how they receive our message? Is that in itself not an act of persuasion as opposed to writing it persuasively?
Um, yeah, that's a very interesting thing that I'm probably not intellectual enough for, but I would say that for me, persuasion is trying to convince them, right? Like,
Okay.
um, what you're thinking is wrong. You should believe my stuff, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I get you. I get you. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna keep talking for hours. Is there anything, does anybody else have any questions, or is there anything anyone would like to add? Anything Olivier, Frank, Alejandro, anyone has said? And also just can I get some feedback? Do people enjoy these calls? Do you prefer the kind of more scripted calls, or do you prefer these conversations a bit more, where it's a little bit more kind of raw? What's better? What should I do more of? Hands up, you can drop it in the chat, you can say it out loud, I don't mind. Just don't leave me here in silence.
I mean, unscripted, I think conversations are good. They're just different to I think anything that's out there. So, and
Yeah.
yeah, inviting different people, I think is good. All sorts of people, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think it would be very cool to, for example, invite a writer.
Yeah,
For example, if you want
that's a
to
great
go into
idea.
that persuasion topic as a sense, um, or like even like excellent marketers, right? Like I feel they're generally better than salespeople at writing copy.
Yeah,
Um,
they just don't understand outbound, which is why they don't normally do a good job of cold outbound copy. But if they learned it, they'd be very good, I think.
Well, I see a lot of marketers in the US working with outbound agencies and they own that topic. I'm also in touch with some bigger SaaS companies these days in Europe, and it's really like a marketing initiative, this whole outbound stuff. So they do very much consider it as a, because again, like outbound is just a motion which exists of different channels where you essentially decide, like, let's see if we can speed up the demand for our service product slash solution, right? And if you're selling into a market, like if you're building something innovative, you have no other option than to do that, first of all, and which is usually the case for SaaS companies, right? But then if you're selling into a very competitive market, you also almost have no other option than doing that because you might miss out, right? Like, it's a matter of speed in that sense, right? Like imagine that, obviously that would be weird, but imagine that Frank was not doing any outbound. Well, first of all, that would be stupid because his product is that. But secondly, it would also be giving him such a disadvantage in the market where all his competitors are doing outbound, right? Um,
Yeah,
so yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's a great point. Anyway, if nobody has any questions, I think we'll wrap it up. I know Olivier is a busy dude and he's
Yes,
got loads left to do. Um,
a lot of
so
admin still, unfortunately.
okay. See you on the other side, guys. Thanks for joining. Really
Thanks, man.
appreciate it.
Thanks
And
so
thanks so
much.
much,
Thanks,
Thank
Olivier.
thanks for
you.
everyone being
Thanks,
here.
Olivia.
Thank you.
Cheers, bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
You too.
Thanks, Wesley.
Yeah, I was too busy fixing all kind of issues.
Thanks for joining, man. I'll end this now because being recorded. Um,
Oh yeah.
all right, cool.
Stop the recording. One thing.